What do you call a perfume for amphibians? Hi, I'm Angel, and this is the Authentic Action Podcast. Welcome. Is your perfume and smelly soap killing you and possibly your future babies? That's what we're going to talk about today, specifically phthalates, which have been linked to all sorts of health problems recently, including insulin resistance, endocrine disruption, productive issues, reproductive issues, cardiovascular disease, um, neurodevelopment, impaired neurodevelopment, asthma, and other allergies, just to name some of the many, many problems that are now being associated with phthalates, which, by the way, have a silent PH at the beginning. It's PHTHALATES, phthalates, obviously. Before I get any further into this podcast, let me mention our wonderful sponsors, the first of whom carries pure essential oils and some other phthalate-free fragrances, and that's Sleeping Dragons Company. You can find essential oils, phthalate-free fragrances, and much, much more over in their website or on Etsy. More on that later. And our second sponsor is the Authentic Action Academy, where we are building a community right now for free of parents and teachers and students, lifelong learners who are interested in developing new approaches to education, where we combine our new technologies and our old hands-on community-based approaches. So join us over there on school if you're interested in those. Back to the topic at hand, phthalates and all of these problems that have been affiliated or linked to phthalates. I want to give a heavy sigh for a pause before I jump into some of the more nuances about it. Because here's the thing, we humans are so quick to blame any new thing for everything, right? And the truth is that we are surrounded by all sorts of things, many chemicals, including those under the umbrella of phthalates, which I think are a handful or so. I should have looked that up more. I know there's three that were talked about in a lot of the things I looked at, but there's probably more than that, but I don't really know how many there are. But I do know there are many, many other chemicals and things that aren't phthalates that are still dangerous and still could, be of concern. So I think it's important to remember to not just jump on every bandwagon of like, oh, this is the culprit, and if you eliminate this from your life, then you will be healthy and live forever because, well, nobody gets out alive. Cheers. I'll drink my peppermint tea to that. You can probably hear a fending off a little bit of a seasonal virus, actually doing quite well, but today it's in my sinuses a little more than it's been, giving me that little bit of a sexy tone, I think. um, so back in 2002, there was a big study that came out in the UK, and there were probably others too, but this one I happened to run into that was referred to as sort of proof that phthalates were being overblown and that they really weren't causing problems like they were being touted to back when they were first being brought to the attention. And so I looked at that study, and I'll try to remember to link it in the show notes here, in case you're interested in reading things for yourself like I am. And in that study, I think it was important the things that stood out to me were that it was mostly animal studies. At the very end, there were some human trials done with perfume or, phthalates, fragrances with phthalates, or just the pure chemicals, I think, of different concentrations on skin, including some humans. Very small trials, like, sample sizes of 10 to 100, mostly in animals, starting with mice and then different kinds of rats and then some rabbits. And mostly they were checking for cancer and mostly they were having these animals ingest various amounts of these chemicals. And they did find a lot of swollen organs and, some shifts, but they were only 2 years at max because of these short lifespans of the animals. Um, and in the end, even the things that stood out as pretty, like the animals that were now again being fed these chemicals, were clearly having some issues. But the study's conclusion said that they weren't carcinogenic. So they basically either said inconclusive or not a problem, even though there's clearly were a lot of problems with it, but that's the way studies go, right? That's not what they were looking for. In any case, I only bring this up because it was relatively small and yet it gets referred to, and this is the way a lot of times science ends up infiltrating our human psyche is that, there'll be a study done, presumably with good intentions, with scientists over, this one was done over quite a long time, I think, and or at least 2 years, some parts of it. But the point being got at, in the study wasn't the point that then it gets brought up as evidence for something else later. So anyway, I bring that up as sort of counter evidence to what I was starting to say before, which is, and that I think it's important not to freak out, man. Don't think that just because phthalates are now being shown to be linked to all these things, that they are necessarily the main culprit. Now, if you are struggling with some, reproductive issues, fertility issues, any of these things, asthma, allergy, insulin resistance, endocrine disruption. I mean, actually, if you look at this list, cardiovascular disease, which is like 80% of the US, and I don't know how much of the UK. So maybe it is a big culprit, but my point is that we don't really know. And there's a lot more that we don't know than we do. And if you start to look at scientific studies for yourself, you'll quickly see the limited little narrow views that we're getting of things, little sample sizes, little tweaking of things, guesses, in the dark, essentially. So, um, I want to say all that because I have a, I do have a company, and the company that sponsors this podcast, Sleeping Dragons Company, that carries cosmetic supplies. We don't make any therapeutic claims, but we do sell essential oils, which are phthalate free, and a growing number of synthetic fragrances, not pure natural essential oils that are also phthalate free. So let me clarify that a good pure essential oil will not have any synthetic things in it at all, and phthalates are synthetic. So pure essential oil should not have any phthalates in them. And many good companies, including Sleeping Dragons Company, make blends of essential oils, and you can dilute an essential oil with carrier oil, like I like to use jojoba oil or um, coconut oil, and that can help it evaporate a little less rapidly, which is the reason that phthalates are used so commonly in fragrances, is because they help add staying power so that the fragrance will last longer. So most of your favorite colognes and perfumes and scented soaps and things that have a very strong fragrance that lasts, unless it specifically says it's like all natural and phthalate free or pure essential oils, then it probably does have phthalates in it. Um, Now again, I want to stress, even if something does have phthalates in it, doesn't necessarily mean it's all that harmful. There's mixed evidence out there, and that might be surprising to some of you because I think sometimes people expect me to come in hard on the side of, selling natural things and essential oils because I'm in that market. But it's actually for that very reason that I want to be very cautious. both because you might perceive me as an authority and I don't want to mislead anyone, and also because I am something of an authority because I've researched a lot, and in that research I've seen there's a lot of mixed evidence. And so again, I don't want to mislead anyone, and I highly encourage you to do your own research and always take everything, even research, with some grains of salt and recognize nothing is, the whole all truth and nothing but the truth. There's always more information. Your own body makes a lot of chemistry. So by becoming fearful of phthalates, you're probably going to create a toxic effect in your body. So there's that. Just like placebo effect works because your body can actually create like painkillers and all sorts of chemicals. We don't even fully understand all of that yet, but we have enough evidence to say with confidence that there's some truth to that. So I don't want to get too far in that, but I do want to touch on that because I think it is important to say, even though it's worth being concerned and perhaps doing some things, which I'm going to go over here in a minute, that can help minimize your exposure to phthalates. It doesn't mean you should freak out and throw out all your products necessarily, or, start to worry about all the exposure that you've had so far. I don't want to freak you out more, but really there are phthalates in a lot of plastics, vinyl. Um, yeah, it's in a lot of, there are phthalates. It's, again, there are a few different chemicals, but they're called phthalates, and they are in many, many things, including the things that you smell, like as perfumes and fragrances, but also things that might put off a smell like vinyl, and some other plastics. So, if you're someone that eats processed food and gets injected with things regularly and wears soft plastic fibers on your body like I'm doing here, um, there's probably other areas of concern. And again, I'm not trying to freak you out. I'm just saying it won't help to freak out because that could just create negative chemistry in your own body, by your body. What can help? Let's get into it. What can help is to become aware. There are some things that are worse than others. Um, and to just start to make better choices. Now, with the new information you have, you can make better choices. So, a place to start is the things you put on your body every day, like your lotion, your shampoo, your soaps, and your perfumes, which is again why I myself shifted to essential oils. Now, picky finger asterisk, let me add that in my decades of dealing in essential oils, I discovered that I have a pretty strong sensitivity to some of the wood oils, pure essential oils, like in particular sandalwood is a big one. Now, that's one that could be adulterated sometimes. So, I mean, since I don't have my own lab, there's a slight chance that that's what's going on. But I actually have found myself sensitive to like pine and cedar and some other woods. And thinking back on my childhood growing up with a wood stove, wood burning stove, and me having reoccurring uh, allergy issues, some things clicked together for me that, and lo and behold, if you do a little research, you'll see that's a fairly common sensitivity, sandalwood in particular, wood oils in general, wood being very high in some pretty caustic kind of chemicals. That's why it's used. A lot of wood oils are used in cleaning. A lot of woods make oils to ward off insects. So when you think about, the properties of different oils, it starts to make sense that not all essential oils are completely harmless. And even, if they don't contain phthalates, they might still create a harmful effect in your body or even put on your body. Now, I also want to say those are to my knowledge, always temporary and go away as soon as you remove the offending, like just stop putting it on your body and it stops being harmful. It's not like it creates lasting scarring effect, at least externally. And please don't take essential oils internally. There's just not enough research out there. There are a few that have been researched, and if you're under the guidance of a qualified practitioner, my name's Paul, and that's between y'all, as they say. But in my professional opinion, essential oils are best kept for external use only. That was a lot of information I didn't plan on adding there, but let's get into some of the other ways besides choosing essential oils, maybe for some of your cleaning products, maybe for some of your perfumes. There are some other ways that you could make better choices to minimize the phthalates that you're getting exposed to and your family is getting exposed to. Now, there's choosing fragrance-free products whenever you can. And again, I don't think you should freak out and throw out all your products, but just start paying more attention and maybe you can start to choose, more natural products, or fragrance-free products in some cases. Especially pay attention to those things, like I said, that you put on your body every day, like perfumes and lotions. A fragrance-free lotion is probably a really good idea because, or, something with an essential oil or natural or phthalate-free fragrances. Now, Sleeping Dragons company carries some phthalate-free fragrances. Those are still synthesized from chemicals. And again, essential oils, even though they come from nature and they're extracted from natural plants and trees and things, they are also concentrated chemicals once they're concentrated. So I think that's important to keep in mind and to be respectful and use them respectfully. So yeah, now so I mentioned that back in 2002 there was this study that's sometimes misappropriated to try to say that all this is a lot of hoopla about phthalates. But you may have noticed that as of 2021, there's a new batch of studies coming out, and there's growing evidence, and as there's more growing concern about endocrine disruption and reproductive issues, this is being brought to the forefront. And there are quite a few studies now that are showing these links between these very common prevalent issues and this very common prevalent chemical. Now, correlation isn't causation. I think that's important to state and to point out. And when I went back to that 2002 study and looked, at it for myself, there were several things that at the start looked like they might be evidence that this phthalate that they were testing in particular in this one part of the study, DEP. I can't remember that it stands for a very long chemical name. At first, it looked like it was causing some effect in like enlarging in the liver, but then they paired it with a bunch of other things in different animals and basically ruled out that it was that. It was probably chemical in general, like the liver being, overwhelmed with just chemical that it doesn't know what to do with. And that's another thing I want to say, little pinky finger asterisk, as I call it. There's a lot more that we don't know than we do know. I said that already, but one of those has to do with like, I was gonna say, where does the poo go? But where does the phthalate go? We don't know. In these studies where they're able to like try to measure when they inject or feed these chemicals to an animal, and then they try to measure how long it takes it to come out into the bloodstream or into the milk or into the organs or, stop being excreted or how much of it is excreted. I think the estimates were like around, I want to say 46% that's ever like recollected. And the rest of that, we don't know. Is that getting stored in the fatty tissue? Most likely that's what happens a lot of times, but is it respirated out? Probably, perhaps some of it. That's a common way that the body gets rid of things. Again, we just don't know. And also these tiny studies that I was looking at, and which weren't that many of them, were, again, I will reiterate, done for the most part on animals with different, when you really start to get into it, even the different, like mice, rats, and rabbits have very different results. And when you take that all the way up to humans, it can be very different. So I just think it's important to keep all those things in mind and to be wise about our choices. Now, all that said, I still think it's wise to minimize our exposure to the things that we find out are toxic or potentially toxic. I mean, why not? There's just so many of them. And so back around to our sponsors today, the Sleeping Dragons Company, where you can find, I happen to have some frankincense in front of me, so I can show you their green bottles and label there. And they carry many wonderful essential oil blends, a growing number of phthalate-free fragrances with some staying power, some chakra oil blends, some hard to find herbs, pigments, lots of cosmetic and creative supplies over at www.sleepingdragonsco.com. So check them out. And as I also mentioned, the Authentic Action Academy is starting a new community over at school with a K. So check it out there. There might start to be a monthly fee as I start to add value to that, but right now it is at no cost to you, and the invitation is open. So you can find it over at SKOOL, and I'll put a link to all that good stuff in the description. And I will also try to remember to put links to at least a couple of these articles in case you're a curious person like me and you like to read things for yourself. In my experience, it's often not as cut and dry as we like things to be when it comes to science in these studies. And I think that's largely why people don't read things for themselves, is they just want somebody else to tell them the answer. Maybe start to really go in there and try to make sense of things. Sometimes there's a very clear answer. But even those, you got to be careful because you could just be, we have this confirmation bias where our brains will find the answer that we think is true, sometimes at the expense of the actual truth. So, um, it's important to remember that all this is a complex issue and there's a lot that we don't know. I said that already. But also, and we do a lot of toxic things to our bodies, and our bodies are resilient and amazing and more flexible and adaptable than we might think, more capable of healing than we're led to believe a lot of times. Now, that does often take, you know, getting out of the way, stop poisoning it and letting it heal. So, um, one of the reasons why I think it's important to minimize exposure. Um, oh, I don't know if finished my list about avoiding vinyl toys, especially with children if they're putting them in their mouths. Um, as I mentioned, that study, a lot of the worst effects were found by feeding animals these chemicals was a lot worse than putting it on the skin, as you might expect. So, if you have a young child that puts a lot of things in their mouth still, try to really be mindful of vinyl toys, things that might, and putting fragrances on your own skin that they might, lick or get off and get in their own mouths, or that you might get in your own mouth in various ways. So I've been thinking a lot more about my lip color, for example, in that venue. I want to reiterate, though, that being fearful isn't the answer. Making wiser choices is. Just do the best you can from where you are with what you have. Um, I wrote over here some other tips just for being healthy besides choosing your phthalate-free fragrances as much as possible, or fragrance-free options, and avoiding certain things that happen to be, the worst culprits. There's also cleaning your floors regularly. I used to be good at that, and I'm trying to get back on the ball because like, things settle, including chemicals, although some of those are more aerated, but so many things settle on our floors and then get kicked back up. And so, cleaning our floors is a way to, like, when you talk about that 80/20 rule, you can get a lot of bang for your buck out of cleaning the floors. That's what I'm trying to say. Um, Keeping plants, like living plants in your environment, can help clean the air. That can help combat things like phthalates and other chemicals and other irritants in your environment. Wearing natural fibers. I know I like the soft fibers too, but I've also been thinking a lot about how can I shift back to more natural fibers that are both better for the broader environment and better for my own internal environment, because there's a growing amount of pretty alarming evidence that we are becoming plastic. Well, because we're like, even the meats that we're eating are infiltrated with these chemicals and plastics. And so yeah, again, I don't want to freak you out. I just want to say, let's try to do the best we can to do a little bit better, and yeah, turn this big ship around as best we can, or at least die knowing that we tried to do the best we could. That's how I'm feeling about it lately. Um, hmm I think that's everything pretty much on my list. I'm giving it a quick once over here. Yeah, I do thank you for stopping by, and I welcome your questions and comments if you got any. I wanted to end with a silly joke here, but I want to mention one more time, don't forget to like and subscribe, or give us a star rating if this is someplace where that sort of thing happens for podcast. Um, Check out some of our other episodes if you're interested. There'll be more interview episodes like I used to have, hopefully coming up soon. And I do intend to do a practical healing series and a neuro spicy series. So if you're interested in either of those, I would love it if you let me know that you have that interest, so that can help motivate me to get it done, girl. And get some good guests in here, hopefully, to talk to me about both of those topics. Mm-hmm. Thanks for being you. Thanks for letting me be me. Stuffy face and hat hair day and all. Uh, what do you call a perfume for amphibians? A fragrance. Ba-dum. You're welcome. Ciao for now.